Good morning. Today we're going to be reading chapters 6 and 7 from my book, Awful Auntie. And then after that, I'm going to try and ring as many of you as possible to see how you're doing. It is such a lovely day outside. We're going to be having a barbecue later, and I hope that you are able to safely enjoy the sunshine today as well. So, chapter 6. Some terrible nightmare. Dead? Stella was in floods of tears now. Please, tell me this isn't true. Tell me this is all just some terrible nightmare. Aunt Alberta looked upon her niece with pity. She took a long, deep puff on her pipe as she pondered her reply. Dead, child. As dead can be. Deader than dead. Completely deadest. In fact, so totally dead, they were buried under the ground months ago. I don't think there is much hope for them now. Memories of her beloved mother and father flashed through Stella's mind. Her papa taking her in a rowing boat on the lake, making her giggle as he clowned around with the oars. Her mamma twirling her around the ballroom of Saxby Hall, teaching her to dance. The memories already seemed like scratchy old black and white films, the pictures fuzzy and jumpy, the sound muffled. She fought to make them clearer. This was all she had left of them now. Months ago, spluttered Stella, so I missed their funeral. Child, it was a terribly sad day. Seeing their two cheap coffins lying side by side. Luckily, the vicar gave me a discount for the funeral service, as it was two people being buried in one go. Did you arrange some flowers from me? No, to be honest with you, they were so dead by that point that they wouldn't have known. The little girl couldn't believe what she was hearing. How could her aunt be so uncaring about her brother and his wife? Stella's dear mother and father. It was no secret she deeply resented Lord and Lady Saxby, even though they had treated her with nothing but kindness. Alberta even had a wing of Saxby Hall all to herself. Without Chester, the woman would have been homeless, having squandered all her own money and plenty of her brother's. However, she never once said thank you or did anything kind in return. Even when she was very little, Stella had noticed the cruel way her aunt behaved around Chester. Alberta would roll her eyes whenever he spoke and sneer whenever he offered her a smile. If it was someone in her family's birthday, Alberta would slink off to her very own greenhouse at the bottom of the long sloping lawn. Unusually, the woman had blacked out its windows with paint. Stella was sure this rather defeated the idea of it being a greenhouse, as no sunlight could shine in. Who had ever heard of plants that could grow in the dark? Still, whatever it was that Alberta had hidden inside, it was free from everyone else's prying eyes. So, I've been in a coma all this time? Asked Stella, her sobs slowing down a little now. Yes, months now. You hit your head in a car crashy-washy and were rushed to hospital in an ambulance. The doctors and nurses did their best for you. Of course, I was on the phone to them every hour asking for news of my only niece. I was so worried your condition might worsen. But if all my bones are broken, why aren't I still there? Demanded the girl. The woman took another puff of her pipe, giving her time to think. Because, my little niecey-weecey, who better to look after you than me? Hospitals are full of ghastly people who are all illy-willy. How much better to be at home in your own bed, under the watchful eyes of Wagner and I. Isn't that right, Wagner? The woman kissed her owl's bill, as she often did. Stella always found this distinctly uncomfortable to watch and shuddered, as much as someone who was bound neck to toe in bandages could shudder. Wagner has looked after you so well these past few months. It was like you were his little owlet." "What do you mean?" asked Stella. "Well, being in a coma, it was hard to feed you. And I wanted to keep you alive. So I would pop a nice juicy slug or beetle into Wagner's mouth. He would give it a good munch and then spit it into your mouth as you slept." The girl's face went green. "That's disgusting!" "See the thanks we get, Wagner," said Aunt Alberta. "Spoiled little brat. Well, we will leave you for now." With that, Alberta stood up, and the bed righted itself. "Where are you going?" demanded Stella. "Oh, I've been rushed off my feet since your mother and father's tragic passing. It's been go, 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 so much to do, selling your mother's clothes, burning your father's letters and diaries." "But I would have wanted to keep them." "You should have said I was in a coma," protested Stella. "That's no excuse. Oh, and there's something I need to ask you." "What?" Suddenly, Aunt Alberta seemed a little coy. She spoke as if choosing her words very carefully. "Well, child, I've been searching and searching for the deeds to Saxby Hall." "Why?" "Because this old wreck would be far too much for a young girl like you to look after." "How old are you?" "Nearly 13, replied Stella. "So, you are 12? "Yes," the girl conceded. "Well, say 12 then, a mere child. Wouldn't it be best for your favourite Auntie to look after Saxby Hall for you?" The little girl fell silent. Her father had always told her that she would one day inherit Saxby Hall, and Stella had promised to look after it for the next generation of Saxbys. Of course, she couldn't look after the house all on her own, but she didn't want Alberta to do it for her. Stella didn't trust this woman one bit. "But," she protested. "No buts! Please don't worry your pretty little head with all this. It's boring grown-ups business. Just as soon as I've turned the whole house upside down and found the deeds to Saxby Hall, all you have to do is sign them over to me, and this place is mine. I mean mine to look after for you, of course. So my little question is this." "Go on." The woman fixed a grin on her face, and it looked like she was wearing a mask. "Well, I was wondering if you knew where those little deedsy-weedsies might be." Stella hesitated for a moment. Her mother and father had always taught her never to tell lies. However, something deep inside her told her that right now she had to. "No." "No?" The little girl's voice went up a notch. Aunt Alberta was not convinced. "Are you sure?" The woman brought her face right up close to her niece's. So close that Stella had to try not to breathe. Such were the fumes of sherry and pipe tobacco on her aunt's breath. "Yes," replied the girl. Stella tried her best not to blink, in case that gave her away. However, she was so unused to lying that her mouth went as dry as hot sand, and she just had to swallow. Gulp. "If I find out that you are lying, young lady, there will be trouble. Mark my words, there will be trouble. Trouble. Trouble." Yes, spelling was certainly not Aunt Alberta's strong point. "Now, if you need anything, my dear, anything at all, just ring this bell." Out of the patch pocket of her tweed jacket, Alberta produced a tiny gold bell. It was in the shape of a miniature statuette of an owl. The woman teased the top, and the quietest ding-a-ling sounded. Either myself or Wagner will come as soon as we possibly can. I'm not eating any more mushed up creepy crawlies from that horrible bird, shouted Stella. The noise startled Wagner, who flapped his wings as he jumped up and down on his mistress's hands, squawking. The huge creature's wings were so long that as he flapped and squawked, a picture hanging on the wall was sent flying. It fell to the floor, the glass smashing. It was a wedding photograph of Stella's mother and father. It was her absolute favourite photograph of them. They were stood outside the local church, the same one they were now buried at. In the picture, they looked so young and in love, her mother achingly beautiful in a flowing white wedding dress, her father boyishly handsome in his shiny black silk top hat and morning suit. Aunt Alberta leaned down to pick up the photograph. She said in a pantomime of caring, "Look what you've done now, you selfish child. Startling poor little Wagner like that." The woman pulled the photograph out of the frame and with one hand screwed it up into a ball. "I'll put this on the bonfire for you." "No," screamed Stella. "Please don't. It's no trouble," replied her aunt. "Now, as I said before your outburst, if there's anything you need, anything at all, just ring the belly welly." "But how can I ring it? I can't move either of my arms," Stella protested. The woman leaned over the girl's bed. "Open wide," she ordered, as if she was a demonic dentist. Unthinking, the girl did as she was told, and Aunt Alberta placed the bell in her niece's mouth. The woman chuckled at the strange sight, and her owl squawked brightly, as if he was laughing too. The gruesome twosome giggled their way over to Stella's bedroom door and slammed it behind them. Bang! Stella heard the key in the lock turn. There was no escape. Chapter 7. The Human Caterpillar. But Stella had to try to flee. Even though this great country house was her home, she didn't want to be here alone with this creepy lady a moment longer. The girl had always found Aunt Alberta spooky when growing up. The woman would sometimes tell her nice traditional bedtime stories, but with a twist. The twist was that in Alberta's versions, evil would always triumph. Hansel and Gretel, for example. It's not the witch that is shoved in the oven at the end, but the two children. The witch lives happily ever after in a house made of sweets. The three little pigs. The big bad wolf huffs and puffs and blows all three little piggies' houses down. And then he has roast pork for breakfast, lunch and dinner every day of the week. Goldilocks and the three bears. When Goldilocks gobbles up their porridge, the bears get their revenge by gobbling her up. Snow White. When Snow White finds the seven dwarfs' cottage, they lock her up and make her do all their cooking and cleaning. Snow White then spends the rest of her life hand washing 7 pairs of dirty dwarf underpants every day. Sleeping Beauty. She never wakes up. She blows off violently in her sleep. Alberta particularly enjoying adding the sound effects on this one, even providing some with a trumpet. Jack and the Beanstalk. Jack loses his grip on the beanstalk while climbing up it and falls down to earth, landing on top of his mother with a giant splat. Rapunzel. She's completely bald. When the handsome prince tries to climb up the tower, all he does is pull her wig clean off. The Frog Prince. The princess kisses a frog and contracts a waterborne disease that makes her bottom explode. The Three Billy Goats Gruff. The troll who lives under the bridge eats all the goats, then eats the bridge, then does a gigantic burp. Again, Aunt Alberta always adored providing the sound effects here. The Little Mermaid, she drowns the end. These twists spoke of how Alberta herself was twisted. Stella had to escape. The girl waited for the sound of her aunt's footsteps to grow fainter as she disappeared down the long corridor. The bell the woman had put in her mouth had a bitter, rusty taste, and she pushed it away with her tongue. It rolled down her body and rested on the top of her stomach. Stella looked down at herself. Everything below her neck was tightly wrapped in what must be miles and miles of bandage. Aunt Alberta had told her that every bone in her body was broken. But could that really be true? More likely, the bandages were just a way of keeping her captive. The girl lifted her head. She could circle her neck around perfectly. Something told her that if she could only wrestle her way out of these bandages, she could make a run for it. Saxby Hall was a few miles from the nearest village, situated beyond a huge expanse of moorland. It was too treacherous to cross at night, but during the day she might make it to the nearest farmhouse in a couple of hours if she ran as fast as she could. Stella could knock on the door first and beg for help. The girl desperately needed to discover for herself the truth about how her parents had died. But before she could escape from the house, Stella had to escape from her bandages. The girl began trying to rock her body from side to side. A flicker of a smile crossed her face as she realised she could move a tiny bit. To the left, to the right, to the left, to the right. Like a swing, she went a little further each time. To the left, to the right. The bell rolled over her stomach and dropped onto the wooden floorboards below. Thud! Ding! It was a long way down to fall. Still, the girl kept rolling from side to side. To the left, to the right. Momentum was building now. To the left, to the right, to the left. For a moment she was balanced on her side. Suddenly she felt weightless. Then even more suddenly she was lying face down on the floor. Thud! Ow! She cried before cursing herself for making a sound. The bandages had loosened a little now, and Stella found she could move her legs and arms a tiny bit. This means they can't be broken, she realised. She shuffled along the floor with all the speed and grace of a caterpillar. After a minute, the girl realised she had only moved a few inches. It was pitiful. She lay on the floor, utterly exhausted and dejected. At this rate, it would take a month to make it to her bedroom door, and a year to drag herself all the way downstairs. Stella knew she wasn't going to get anywhere until she had wriggled out of these bandages. But how? She couldn't move her hands or feet. Then she had an idea. She was going to have to bite her way out. Stella tucked her chin down as far as it could possibly go. Next, she stuck her tongue out and tried to hook a piece of the bandage with the tip, like trying to hook a rubber duck with a rod at the fair. It was much more difficult than it looked. After trying and trying and trying, finally she managed to catch the end of the bandage between her teeth. Yanking her neck back, she tugged at it. Shaking her head from side to side, she loosened it. When she had pulled a long enough strip of bandage loose, she held it tight in her mouth. It was like she was a dog who had found a very special stick and was never letting it go. Stella shuffled back towards her bed. Exhausted but determined, she hooked the loose piece of bandage on one of the sharp metal springs under her mattress. Next, she rolled herself over and over. The more she rolled, the more the bandage unravelled. It was working! With each roll, she could feel her body moving that little bit more. Soon she could waggle her arms a little, then her legs. The human caterpillar was hatching into a butterfly. The excitement at slowly becoming free filled her tired body with an electric energy. Soon she was rolling faster and faster and wagging her arms and legs frantically. As soon as her left arm was free, she grabbed the end of the bandage with her hand. It was unravelling at speed now. Next, her right arm came free. Now she could push the bandage down, and soon she kicked her legs free. For a moment, she lay on her back on the floor of her bedroom. The epic struggle was over. The bandage was curled up next to her like a snake she had killed with her bare hands. Stella's bedroom was 2 floors up. In her nightdress, she crawled over to the window. Looking down to the snow-covered lawn, she realised she was far too high up to jump. A huge white figure loomed at the end of the long sloping garden. It looked like a snowman, but it was nearly as tall as the house. A ladder leaned next to it. What was it? Stella was transfixed by it for a moment. But darkness was descending, and there was no time to lose. But there was a problem. The only way out of her bedroom was the door, and it was locked. There was only one key on the other side of the door. We'll read chapter 8.